Good evening. Welcome to the Yorktown Central School District Board of Education meeting for January 28th, 2019. Can I have a motion to go into executive session for the matters pertaining to the employment history of particular individual and contractual negotiations?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Can I have a motion to go back into public session?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Good evening. Welcome to the Yorktown Central School District Board of Education meeting for January 28, 2019. Could we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and then remain standing for a moment of silence for armed forces and those in our community that have lost loved ones, especially the mother of Elizabeth Philibar, the father of Susan Snippen, and the father-in-law of Katie Sherwood.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dr. Hutter, we have a full house tonight. We're going to start with public comment. Is there anybody wishing to speak on agenda-related items? All right. I'll leave it over to you and our wonderful high school students.
So we have roughly 22 board meetings each year. This is probably my favorite because we get to acknowledge all the great work throughout the course of a high school career. I always enjoy this. I always marvel in the accomplishments of our students. They're so impressive. I'm so blessed to have the opportunity to work with your children each day. They are wonderful, wonderful people. I think you already know that, but it's always nice to hear that about your own children as well. So at this point, what I'm going to do is turn the program over to our high school principal, Mr. DeGennaro, and he will proceed with the awards. What I'm going to ask is that the board make their way with my colleagues from Central Administration off to the side so we can acknowledge the children.
No, I don't know. Oh, no. Listed. Can't see.
Yeah, then I'll give it to you and then you can send it right around. We'll change the rotation, but it's all good. So I'm going to turn this if I can. I'm going to do a little rearranging. Good evening, everyone. Dr. Hatter, as always, I agree with you, and I couldn't agree more. We have so many wonderful high school events during the course of the year, and to be here tonight, this is clearly one of the best, if not the best, to honor academic excellence, also in athletics, and also in our wonderful music program. So what we'll do is, Kath, we had a little change of rotation here. As the students come up, you'll come up, I'll present you with a certificate. We'll shake hands, and we'll send you right to the high school administrators, and then right around to the school board and the district office administrators. I first would like to recognize our assistant principals from the high school, Vicki Garrett, Chris Miller, and John Gallis, who have joined me up here at the podium. Also, there's so many other people in the room who are deeply connected to the high school, but I would like to recognize our athletic director, Mr. Barrett, who's here, my secretary, Amelia Paterno, and the teacher leader for the guidance department at the high school, Ms. Servini. So a round of applause for them as well. I'll read why we're honoring our student, and then followed by the name, and then that student should come right up to the podium. So from the class of 2019 first decile, Saketh Anand. Class of 2019 first decile, Reese Andrews. Class of 2019 first decile, Julia Bottenheimer. (2019) National Merit Scholarship commended student and class of 2019 first decile, Pranav Barugala. The Con Edison Scholar Athlete Award, which is the most prestigious award a high school student athlete can win, as well as All-State First Team in tennis, and easily the most accomplished tennis athlete I've seen in a 30-plus year career that I've had, Caitlin Ferrante. Bear with me on this next one. Class of 2019 salutatorian. Class of 2019 first decile. 2019 National Merit Competition semifinalist. And All Eastern Honors Symphony Orchestra, Kevin Fink. Class of 2019 first decile, Colleen Forte. Class of 2019 first decile, Anna Coons. (2019) National Merit Competition semifinalist and class of 2019 first decile, Jasmine Labor. (2018) New York State Symphony Orchestra Principal Cello, Andrew Liu. Class of 2019 first decile, Catherine McClay. (2019) National Merit Scholarship commended student and class of 2019 first decile, Cooper Malloy. Class of 2019 first decile, Deirdre Murphy. Class of 2019 first decile, New York State Athletic Administration Section 1 Scholar Athlete, and that's one of two. There was one male winner and one female winner throughout the entire section in the Hudson Valley. And 2019 National Merit Competition semifinalist, Ryan Onasevich. (2019) National Merit Scholarship commended student and class of 2019 first decile, Christopher Perino. (2019) National Merit Scholarship commended student and class of 2019 first decile, Janani Rajadurai. Class of 2019 first decile, Pooja Rajadurai. Regeneron Science Talent Search Scholar and class of 2019 first decile, and also the class of 2019 President, Saili Setpute. Regeneron Science Talent Search Scholar, Shrilla Shah. Class of 2019, first decile, Kevin Stetnich. Class of 2019, first decile, Julianne Strauss. Class of 2019, first decile, Nicole Tamanios. Class of 2019, first decile, 2019 National Merit Competition semifinalist, Regeneron Science Talent Search Scholar, and the class of 2019 valedictorian, Diane Yang. (2019) National Merit Scholarship commended student, Kenny Zhang. I'd like to thank all of our award recipients tonight, and also thank you for, and congratulate and thank the students and the parents as well. You send us great kids to work with each and every day. You should be proud, obviously, and you know this, but I feel compelled to say this publicly. The class of 2019 is a remarkable group. They're so unbelievably talented and gifted in so many ways. So to be honored tonight in this room, everybody should be real proud, and we certainly are in our roles to have the opportunity to work with them each and every day. So one more round of applause for everybody. Thank you for being here.
So before we take a brief recess, I wanted to share a very special announcement with you. We just received the news today, and we thought it would be fitting before we took a brief recess to share the news with you. The news has to do with our Crampon School, so I'm going to invite Crampon School Principal Dr. Roberts and Assistant Principal Mr. Avdak to the podium to share the news with you.
Good evening, everyone. Please excuse my back. It's wonderful to see all of you, but we'll talk in a little bit. In November of this past year, Mr. Avdak and I did apply for this New York State School of Character. It was a very lengthy process. We submitted the application, as I said, in November. We did receive notification in December that our score warranted a site visit. So on January 7th, we did host Dr. Phil Fusco from character.org at Crampon Elementary School. It was a wonderful day. We had Mrs. Carbone, we had Mrs. Bowes, we had Dr. Hatter, we had PTA presidents. We had so many people, our students, of course, and our staff were there with us. And we received official notification this morning that Crampon Elementary School has been named a New York State School of Character. So we're very proud of that. And thank you. We're very honored. We know that we cannot do this work alone, and I just need to tell a very quick story because I did receive notification on Friday, and I was bursting. So I asked Dr. Fusco, may I please tell Dr. Hatter, may I please tell Mrs. O'Shea, may I please tell Mrs. Carbone? He said yes. So Dr. Hatter and Mrs. Carbone were actually in a meeting, and I asked Mrs. Riccio to please interrupt them, and she said, Lori, this better be good. And I said, I promise you. So we were very excited. And Mr. Avdik just wants to share what the actual announcement states.
So thank you all. It really is an honor to just work with such exceptional children and exceptional staff. So this recognizes us for our holistic work of educating kids in character education and service learning. And we'll be moving forward with next steps to be recognized as a national school of character, hopefully in the spring of this year. And we're all very excited and honored to have this. And really thank the board and Dr. Roberts and our teachers for all their exceptional work and leadership with your fabulous children. Thank you.
And Ms. Muldoon is in the house.
And Ms. Muldoon.
It's such a special time in our school district to have a school recognized as a New York State School of Character. We're going to be pursuing that national award. You can see the banners behind us. We'll be looking to hoist 2019 banners for a similar effort. Our high school was asked to apply for the National Blue Ribbon Award for Academic Excellence. Our athletic program was recognized with the very prestigious Joseph Abraham Award. We have so many NYSBA participants for our music program. I could not be more proud of the work that our children do. It is just so wonderful to come to work every day and work with such a great team, to work with such great children. And I live here too, and I'm just honored to be a Yorktown resident, to have my children in the Yorktown schools as well. It's such a great time for us, and your children are the reason why it's such a great time for us. So I thank you all at this moment in time. Any comments?
No, I'm just, congratulations to Crampon. But it's not just Crampon. Every school is a school of character. Crampon got the award, but it didn't happen without Brookside and Mohansick starting the ball rolling. Middle school got it to be a reward school for the high school. Everybody is part of it from kindergarten on. It's just a great K-12 education program. So we're proud of everybody, our students tonight for coming out. It's just, we're proud of all of you. Thank you.
So we'll take a brief 5-minute recess. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. It's going to be super exciting, or you can go on and continue homework and have other things you have to do. Have a good night, everyone.
All right, once again, you brought us some amazing students, Dr. Hatter.
All right.
Each year they top each other. So we're going to go up to our superintendent's report right now?
Yes, so I will make my way to the podium and introduce our next presentation. Excuse me. In light of many of the developments that are taking shape in town, some that we're aware of, some are still in the early development stages, we, as a district and as an administrative team, took it upon ourselves to give some thought to educational configurations, what's best for children, what models are most effective and most efficient in supporting the needs of our students and bringing to them a varied and strong educational experience, K-12. So we created an educational planning committee to help us to better understand the work ahead of us. And that educational planning committee consisted of myself, Mrs. O'Shea, Mr. Rosen, Mr. Barrett, Ms. Leese, all of the building administrators, both the principals and the assistant principals, were a part of this. We thought it wise at this point in the school year to provide the board with an update as to where we are. There are no final recommendations, obviously. There are no final decisions at this point, just a lot of study, a lot of school visitations, and a lot of conversations that have taken place, and we'd like the board to better understand our progress to this point. So to give you the presentation, we will all actually be delivering the presentation. Mrs. O'Shea, myself, and our 5 building principals will be sharing in this presentation. So at this time, I'm going to invite Mrs. O'Shea to the podium to begin the evening's presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Hatter. Good evening, Board of Education. As Dr. Hatter shared with you, our Educational Planning Committee began meeting in October, and our charge was to recommend a K-12 educational model that meets the needs of our district as we prepare our students with our 2020 vision plan. I know the board is well versed in the 2020 vision. We've shared it multiple times over the last few years. Our purpose is to have students who leave us and graduate from Yorktown School District in a position to influence change in the world. And our way that we have identified through our 2020 vision to get there is to cultivate empathy in our students, to nurture creativity and innovation, to promote critical thinking, and to provide opportunities for students to progress in their ambitions. While that is a very lofty 2020 vision, we also have embedded what the board is well aware of, which is our ESTEAM priority. In addition to our ESTEAM priority, we are very much committed to the social emotional wellness of our students in addition to their academic growth. Excuse me one moment. Okay. Nope, I have the slides in here. Okay. So what you'll hear about this evening is the path that we took as a committee to investigate what would be a very appropriate K-12 educational model for us moving forward. We looked at the current space utilization in each school. We looked at what would be the implications of reopening French Hill. We looked at the implications of moving 5th grade to the middle school. We looked at the we looked at the implications of a Princeton model, which is basically having all sections of one grade housed in a particular building. We looked at neighboring schools for K-5, which would mean that all of our 3 elementaries would house K-5 students. We looked at our current configuration as it exists, and we looked at moving 3rd grade to Crampont. We're going to go through the slides and share with you what were the pros that we saw in each model, as well as some considerations for moving forward. As we began this journey, the committee as a whole went and toured all of our existing buildings. We looked at all of the space configurations, and we looked at how that space is being utilized. We also spent a lot of time looking at how the traditional model of education and traditional arrangements of schools no longer work any longer. We looked at what's necessary for students to be prepared for jobs that don't exist today. What opportunities do we need to provide for them? What do we do to help them think critically, to think creatively, to look at large amounts of data, to address their issues relating to social, emotional, and physical wellness? How do we continue to support all the arts? How are we sure we are addressing the whole child? So you will see that some of our current initiatives that we've been working on in the last few years have led us to a place where we are now using spaces in our building for makerspace, eSTEAM labs, social emotional learning support rooms. We have special class programs as well as programs for students who need intervention at various levels in all disciplines. We need flexible learning spaces as we move forward so students can engage in work and learning and collaborating in a very fluid environment. Part of our consideration also was we have a wonderful, very skilled teaching staff in our district. But all teachers and all learning needs to continue and grow. So we really had in our minds a need for large professional development spaces so that our teachers can continue to collaborate and work together as well. So after walking around all of our elementary buildings and our middle school and our high school, we really began to notice that each school in the elementary level is really, it's nearing maximum capacity. We do have some modest programmatic impact regarding the number of students currently at our elementary. Mostly at Mohansick, we see that some of an impact is felt in the special areas in terms of not having enough space to deliver that service. In French Hill, which has been idled for 10 years, that is currently being used for certain district needs, which we'll talk about, as well as a rental to community groups. The middle school and the high school do have some additional capacity within their building right now, but as we look at our future instructional programming, that would impact the additional capacity that is available at the middle school and high school. One of the first things that we looked at was reopening French Hill. If we were looking at our enrollment moving forward and we were recognizing the fact that we are seeing some growth at the elementary level, our first area of focus was to look at the reopening of French Hill. So we identified some pros and some considerations of what that would mean for us as a district. So the pros would certainly be that we could most likely accommodate any foreseeable enrollment and capacity trends moving forward. We can reduce the bus rides duration in some grades dependent on the grade level configurations that we would have in place at that time. However, the considerations are that there is a significant cost of bringing the French Hill School to a school-ready condition. We have invested so much money in our facilities over the last 10 years, and to have French Hill reopen in a way that is in line with our existing schools, it would be a significant cost. In addition, those monies may not be state aidable. A consideration would be the increased potential for an imbalance of class sizes based on the both sides of town. This would add more than $2 million to our annual operating budget and may require exceeding the 2% tax cap. There are many operational considerations that we would have to take into place if we were to consider reopening French Hill. Right now, that building is used for voting, which would mean that we would have voting back in a school building where children were present. It's being used for wrestling practices at the high school, for high school testing location. We would have lost revenue in the rentals that we currently have there, and the community partnerships that we have housed in French Hill could be impacted. So that was our first area that we looked at, reopening French Hill. Mrs. Horowitz is going to talk about the option of moving 5th grade to the middle school.
Good evening. As Mrs. O'Shea said, we were looking at other options, and one of which was looking at moving the 5th grade to MESMS. By taking the 5th grade to MESMS, it will increase the capacity of Brookside and Mohansick. By moving the 5th grade up to us, then we'll be able to move the 3rd grade up to Crompond. The only issue is that it does not alleviate the space issue at Crompond. For the first time, our 5th graders would be able to participate in after-school activities here in the middle school. However, unfortunately, they will also be riding the buses, the after-school buses. The after-school buses in the middle school level and high school level run differently. Instead of dropping the child off at home, they drop them at a cross street. So you'll have our 10-year-olds being dropped off at cross streets to get home. So that was one of the issues that we saw with bringing the 5th grade up here. We would have difficulty in the common areas. Right now we run 3 lunch periods, so we'd have to run 4 lunch periods, which would add to 4 lunch periods within this area. Our gym would be overused. Our locker room would be overused. We wouldn't have enough space. And due to the wonderful renovation we did here in the middle school a few years ago, we have lost locker space, and it will cause us issues with the utilization of the school. For 5th grade to come up here, what we would have to do is create a section for them, so they would take over what we call the new wing. And if we take over the new wing, that will mean the displacement of 200 students, which will then cause us to have to recreate how we run our teams. And it will cause the loss of teams. So that would be another issue, unfortunately, that we would have with moving the 5th grade here. Our special area offerings will also be overcrowded. We'd still have to meet the New York State goals for art, health, family and consumer science, and technology. However, we'd still have the same limited staff, special area staff, to run these classes. The middle school purpose is to address the cognitive, social, emotional, physical, and intellectual characteristics of 11 to 13-year-olds. And in doing this, we have to deal with our students going through puberty, having their social, emotional needs. So because of all these issues with our 6th to 8th graders, we have now a mindful place, which we'd have to remove in order to help our students grow in the middle school. We have a growth of special needs classes and programs, which we're moving rooms to accommodate in order to meet the needs of our students. We'll have to remove the makerspace, in which will go against our East Team initiative. So because of these reasons, it's not feasible to move the 5th grade up to the middle school. I'll now have Mr. DeGennaro come to discuss the impact of the 5th grade to the main campus.
Thank you, Mrs. Horowitz. We had a brief discussion on what the impact would be on the campus for the arrival and dismissal. So clearly, a greater discussion would have to take place on what the current arrival looks like now, what it could be with an extra grade on campus. Would it be the same? Would it be similar? Would it be dramatically different? Same with dismissal, and Mrs. Horowitz did allude to it a little bit. A bigger discussion would have to happen on the late runs and the shared buses. 5th graders potentially could be with 12th graders on buses on some of those, on that 3rd and 4th, those 2 late runs that we currently have. The cost to the change in the traffic pattern, we were shown different models and looked at it as a committee and discussed the positives and negatives of each model. And there were a series of them that clearly gave us some different benefits or again, things to discuss and look at if we were to move forward bringing the 5th grade over. The loss of the front field, that was one of the models that had showed clearly an additional need for parking and where you put the extra cars and buses that would come on campus. So a traffic pattern study was looked at. And again, with additional need for parking on campus, you're bringing over a whole grade level of teachers, support staff, and so forth. So they coming to the campus, they would have to park as well. The playground area and field usage, right now at Crampon, obviously 5th graders do have a playground area. One does not exist on this campus. So the conversation would have to be had, do you want to add a playground here? If so, cost, location, potentially it could take away some more green space if you're losing some more green space in the front field of the middle school, again, due to the traffic volume. And then the infrastructure. I'm not sure what that would cost, but I can assure you that there is a cost, and that would have to be studied by a different committee and more extensively to see what the infrastructure needs are to bring a whole nother grade to the campus. So, thank you.
Thank you. The Princeton Plan started in Princeton, New Jersey in 1948 as a way to desegregate the public schools. At that time, town officials had to quickly form a plan to address their present segregated school system and decided that the plan would be to distribute the children according to grades and not according to neighborhoods. In the 1960s, the Princeton Plan became a national model following the Brown versus Board of Education's 1954 ruling. Pros of the Princeton Plan. 1, most cost-effective year after year. Transportation needs would change, which would result in decreased costs. Special education and general education programs would not need to be duplicated or implemented in other buildings housing the same grades. Certain equipment, materials, and supplies would be geared for specific building configurations, which will decrease the need to supply the same items to multiple buildings. A school building under the Princeton plan would be designed specifically for the age group and developmental needs of that age group. Number 2, smooths, equalizes class sizes across the district. Over the years, Mohansick and Brookside have had different student enrollment numbers, resulting in dissimilar number of students in certain grade levels. This affects class size and ultimately staffing needs and building capacity. The Princeton plan equalizes the number of students in each section in all grade levels. Number 3, convenient for professional development and other district initiatives. With a Princeton plan, professional development can be targeted for one building and/or specific grade levels needs and would not need to be split or duplicated. Number 4, children remain with their cohort. The Princeton plan brings the children together beginning in kindergarten, which fosters friendships right from the start of their school life and increases student diversity in schools. And number 5, students riding the bus with similar age peers. There tends to be some concerns with having kindergartners and third grade students ride the bus together because of the age and developmental span. The Princeton plan has similar age and close grade levels riding the bus together.
Good evening, everyone. So while Mrs. Berry discussed the pros to the Princeton model, I will review some of the cons or areas to consider with it. Most important is its impact to our students and families. To begin with is busing. With all of the students on a grade in the district attending one school and the need to cover a large geographic area, this would certainly create longer bus rides for our students and even significantly so for many. Having young students on a bus for 50+ minutes would just be very difficult, especially for our youngest learners. Additionally, there would be a cost impact here with having to add additional buses to cover such a large area and potentially being ready for the next run for the next school building. Other impacts to our students and families include multiple school transitions. Students would have 3 transitions in 6 years between kindergarten to grade 4. This could lead to a feeling of anonymity in a school and less of a connectedness. There would be greater separation from the neighborhood children. Neighbors just one grade level above might be attending a different school. They wouldn't be at the bus stop attending special events. Having siblings in multiple schools, for parents, the conflicts with managing different school calendars and trying to attend different events, PTA functions, etc., would be a burden. It would also be difficult for young families that might have children in 3 different schools to manage the many different start times and end times. There would be a loss of peer role models. The lack of age diversity could affect socialization. Our kindergarten and first grade students love to see our second and third graders come in and read to them. They do look up to them. One day they want to be them. So we would lose some of that opportunity. The loss of connectedness to the teachers. Our students enjoy seeing their former teachers. They enjoy seeing when their siblings might have that teacher too. So that would definitely be a change in their feelings connected to their teachers. And there would be a feeling of loss of community school. We would have you for 2 years and then you would leave. This could be an issue particularly for our youngest students. With the Princeton model, we would also need to consider the possible reconfiguration of the buildings to meet the needs of the students. Examples would be having sufficient restrooms for all of the kindergarten students. What is the weight of the doors and that impact, the size of the outdoor play equipment, etc. And in the end, the Princeton model does not solve our capacity issue. As you can see on the next slide, currently Brookside and Mohansick are very similar, running 22 and 23 sections. Irregardless of whether Brookside became a kindergarten to first grade and Mohansick a 2 to 3 or vice versa, we would still have the same number of sections. In Crampon running 21, there would be no change. So even with the Princeton model, we would still have the issue of capacity. The team also considered having 3 kindergarten through 5 schools or neighborhood schools. The pros to this model is that it would build a true community school feel. You would be connected to your building, being there for 6 consecutive years. That certainly would build longer relationships with families and has the greatest continuity for our students. They would have 6 years in one building before transitioning to the middle school. Some of the considerations would be the geographic proximity of the schools. This could be problematic. If we think about how close Mohansick and Crampon are to one another, where would you really draw the lines in that catchment area? Because they might be so close and there's no guarantee on how many students there would be in each grade in those areas, that catchment area might have to change and be flexible after a few years. This could lead to different feelings from families that started in one building. Maybe they are in a different streets that were once going to Crampons, might then go to Mohansick. This model has the greatest potential for inequity in class sizes. We know this is very important, and it's something that we're always looking at. It would be a concern if, due to the numbers of students in a particular grade, that's one school could have 18 students in, say, a 4th grade class, another having 20, and another school having 24. We just couldn't really control how many students you end up really having in each of those grades. It would lead to a more divided district feel. Students and their families would remain in one building for 6 years and really wouldn't have a lot of opportunity for getting to know one another. There would be a lot of staffing transitions. If there are only 3 sections on a grade level 1 year, those teachers would have to go to a different grade level or possibly a different school. If that changed year after year, you would consistently have teachers changing grades. If you only had enough students in one grade, say grade 5, you had 3 sections 1 year. The following year, you might need 4 sections. So there would be a lot of changeover for our teachers. And this model has the most significant infrastructure upgrades. Crampons would need to be ready for kindergarten and 1st grade students, and vice versa, Brookside and Mohansick would need to be ready for 4th and 5th graders. Our team also considered moving the 3rd grade to Crampons and having that become a 3 through 5 school, and Brookside and Mohansick being kindergarten to 2nd grade. Some of the pros with this is that it certainly resolves the capacity issues at Brookside and Mohansick and would allow us the room to run some of those incredible programs that we are really invested in already. While this would be disruptive to Crampons, it would have the least disruption to the other 4 school buildings. It certainly would allow greatest continuity in delivering professional development for grades 3 through 5 by having the teachers under that one roof. Some of the things to consider in this model is that Crampons enrollment could exceed 800 students, and that is something to really consider organizationally and in planning for that school building. It would be adding capacity to Crampons, adding 10, 11, or even 12 sections to the building. That would have a dramatic impact on its organizational culture. How do we do things? How are they running? What do we need to do differently to accommodate all of those new students? The staffing increases that would need to be met for Crampons with the increased enrollment are not just classroom teachers, it also would be increases for special area teachers, specialists, and administrators. There would be, with adding 260 plus students to the campus, certainly there would be great impact with buses and cars, with parents wanting to drop off, pick up, and just accommodate the buses. That would be an incredible need, and it would need, the infrastructure there would need to be examined, how the campus could handle that. And then there would certainly be an impact on scheduling. Right now there is still only one library, one gym, one esteem lab. How do you really schedule the addition of 10, 11, or 12 sections so that they could access those rooms and programs? Finally, our team examined leaving the grade configurations as they are, with Brookside and Mohansick remaining kindergarten through grade 3 and Crampons at 4th and 5th grades. The pros to this model is that it certainly maintains the current district configuration. the seamless continuity of operations. We don't need to change really much of what we do and how we do it. It is known to be a successful model. It is comfortable for our families. It is known to them. They know what to expect. They know who's there. They know who's waiting for them. They know the neighborhood children. And any construction that would be needed would be state aidable. Things to consider in this model is that the construction that may be needed at the schools should not adversely affect our programs, so it would need to be considered the timing of that construction, the rollout of it, so that our programs could function without the students and teachers being greatly disturbed. And finally, the total cost for the construction needs, I don't know what they are, but they certainly would need consideration. So thank you, and now I would like to invite up Dr. Roberts to continue the presentation.
Good evening. It's nice to look at all of you at this point. As Mrs. O'Shea said, our committee did form in October of 2008, and we were charged with recommending a K-12 educational model that meets the aspirational program needs offerings for our district vision, while always being mindful of enrollment trends. And our committee collectively acknowledges that we need additional capacity. We remain mindful of overall class size. We have options to consider. We believe our current configuration has been very successful. We will continue to monitor the housing developments in town, and we will certainly consider start times in our schools. At this point, I proudly present Dr. Hatter.
Thank you. Just going to take some notes. So before we go any further, I just want to thank our Educational Planning Committee. They're all invested in this process. They're also committed to it. They're all here tonight, which is wonderful, and I really appreciate their presence and participation in our presentation, our program tonight. We stand before you with no clear answer. We're not advocating for or endorsing a specific option. We've studied a lot, and I think we owed it to our board, to our community, to our students to study the different options that are available to us. We have work to do. And at this point, we acknowledge that there is no one option that checks all of the boxes for us. Each of these options has pros and cons, considerations as well. So what we're going to respectfully ask is, we've reviewed the educational components. That's from the time the students get on the bus to the time they get off of the bus, and every minute in between. We've reviewed that. We've looked at board heights and door weights and bathrooms and classes and playground areas and traversing campuses both north, south, east, west. And where we are is we need additional capacity, and we know that. The good news is we have options. We have several options. We have an idle building down the road. We have opportunities for perhaps new construction or renovating existing spaces. And at this time, if it meets with the board's approval, the Educational Planning Committee respectfully requests that the steering committee perhaps take on the role of looking into some of the costs of the constructions, of looking at what true cost it would be to bring French Hill up to school-ready condition, up to our standards of security, our standards of technology, our standards of infrastructure and facilities. So I would just, on behalf of the committee, respectfully ask that the board take up the continuation of this conversation in the steering committee so that we can begin to attach numbers to the ideas that we have. We are very mindful of the new construction that's happening in town. We have one reference point in Crampon Crossing. That came online a few years ago, and we experienced, and it was marketed in a similar way to the Wyant property and to the property adjacent to that, in that it would be for empty nesters or people who would not add capacity to our schools, and we found that we inherited about 1.2 children per unit of development with Crampon Crossing. So I anticipate just similar numbers if history is the best predictor of the future. We know of the Wyant property that's coming online, that's 40-plus units. We know of the property adjacent to that, that's just shy of 30 units. We know of Crampon Terraces, which is near the Lowe's property. That is somewhere between 80 and 90 townhouses that are being forecast. I can't tell you what the timing is. What I can tell you is that the Wyant property has passed the initial stages, and they reference in that application the property adjacent to it. So that's where they are in town. With regard to capacity currently, Dr. Seversky, the board contracted with Dr. Seversky. Last year, he conducted just such a thorough and wonderful study of our demographics, enrollment, and capacity. And Crampon currently is at 89.5% of capacity. And what does that mean? Well, it means that of the usable space in the building, about 90% of it is already being occupied with classrooms, with students. So once you hit that 90% threshold, you're in a very delicate area in that program starts to be impacted. That means the E-STEAM lab turns into a classroom. The science lab now becomes a classroom. And the other two elementary schools aren't in much better shape. Brookside's at 86%, Mohansick's at about 84% capacity. And although we do have capacity in the middle school, there are other considerations that Mrs. Horowitz and Mr. DeGennaro pointed out. We're 100 lockers short. If you'd like to have fifth graders clustered in one side of the building and have a true teaming model, we don't actually have the capacity for that in our middle school. There would need to be some additions or renovations or alterations made to that campus. So these are all things that we're considering, and we just respectfully ask that the steering committee take up this matter so that we can begin to attach costs to each of the options that we've discussed with you tonight.
First of all, I think I just want to thank everybody, because I know this was a lot of work. And after we got Dr. Seversky's study and we were talking about this, it was Pete who said, you know, we should not make plans based upon a capacity study. We should make plans based upon what's educationally best for our students. So I'm glad that you went through this whole process for us, because we now have a starting point, because we know what's right for kids. So now we can figure out the rest of it. It would be helpful if we could have a discussion. I don't know if they can join us at the table and we can discuss.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Dr. Hatter?
Yes, we're going to have the principals join us?
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine.
Hello, how are you? Good. Just going to keep this in the middle. Thank goodness, I'm a little shy.
Go ahead, Mike.
So, Dr. Hatter, your suggestion to move some of this work to the steering committee at this point makes sense to me. However, by my calculation, there were 6 different configurations that the education committee looked at. Are you suggesting that the steering committee review all 6 of those for financial implications, or can we whittle that number down?
I think we can whittle that down. I think in the opinion of the community, moving of the committee, wrong C word, the committee, not the community. In the opinion of the committee, moving 5th grade to our middle school creates so many infrastructure needs and upgrades and costs, and it doesn't resolve the capacity issue. We still have to release the pressure valve on capacity in all 3 elementary schools. So now we've created, actually Brookside and Mohansick would be okay, but we would be creating, right, a squeeze at Crampon. So I would be comfortable, and I believe the committee is comfortable in not looking at moving 5th grade and the alterations that accompany that. We've had the study done with our architects as part of our looking at start times as well, and being able to align start times. That was a part of that work that the committee undertook. So I'd be okay not going further in that regard. What we do ask is for the steering committee to take on an intensive review of the cost of reopening the French Hill campus and better understanding that. Looking at the option of moving 3rd grade to Crampon and assigning a cost to that, and looking at maintaining our current configuration and just better understanding what capacity needs we would have K-5. If we kept our current configuration, what would that mean with regard to alterations or additions? I'm not quite sure what that would mean, but I would ask steering to take that part on.
One of the things I would ask, can I just, because I've been doing steering for so long, Anthony's been with me. I don't think steering would have any problem taking this on, but I think it would be most beneficial to have one of the education, at least one of the educational planning committee members with us during the process, because although we could put numbers to things, we can't put answers to some of the other issues.
We would appreciate that. We would appreciate, honestly, everyone at this table being at the table with you.
Go ahead, Pete.
Mike, did you have something?
So, but that also sounds to me like you'd like to take the K through 5 neighborhood schools option off the table.
We would, in that the geographic proximity of Crampon to Mohansick doesn't necessarily lend itself to a neighborhood school structure. We would be redrawing lines quite often. And the disruption that that would create for our community is something that we're cognizant of. So it would work in year 1, maybe year 2 or 3 or 4, but at some point in the very foreseeable future, we would be redrawing lines to equalize school sizes, because if we go to K-5 configurations, we may not be adding on to the capacity, so we would be limited to the footprint that we have. So the only thing that would give would be the line, so that we could equalize or adjust enrollments as needed.
Is it possible to get any information from the town? I mean, I see Wyatt, and it's DeVito behind Wyatt, is X number of units. Crampon Terrace is on the other side of town, so does that equalize out the damage? The capacity? I don't know. Tom, you're making faces. Opportunities. And well, it's opportunity, I get it. But we don't know, because if we're looking at different buildings.
There was a study done based on what they think the population growth is going to be.
Yes.
I think we have to use that as our baseline and not try and speculate on what one location is going to give over the other.
But if you're looking to the future, and you're looking to do something, if you don't have an idea of what that's going to be, you could.
So we can answer both
can I
questions. We can look at both of those. So we're looking at approximately 80 units on the Mohansick side of town, zone for Mohansick and the Crampon Terraces, and we'd be looking for about 60 some odd units on the Brookside catchment
Okay.
area. With regard to
Okay,
student
so it's
enrollment
just-
and what that would bring, in Dr.
Okay.
Seversky's study, he forecast a low, a medium, and a high estimate, and he said, if you think Yorktown's the kind of community that people want to move into, then I would suggest you plan for the high level. And I do,
Okay.
based on our conversations and our study of the property trends and turnovers, we do think Yorktown's a desirable community to live. So the forecast enrollment that were provided to us by the year 2022, 2023, we're looking at an average of 600 students per school. Right now, we're at about 500 in roughly in each of the schools. So a little bit more in some than others, but we're not at 600. And that's a 3-4 section increase. And those are classroom spaces that in some instances we don't have. In the middle school, we're looking at a number in 2025-26 on the high end of the estimate, approaching 1,000 students, which is substantially more than we have now. And at the high school, though, if you follow that cohort through, we're looking at about 1,200 plus students.
So I think that leads into what my question is. I think a lot of this was looking at the influx as elementary students. Well, those students will get older. Have we addressed whether or not the high school can handle the capacity of this influx of students, so we're not faced with a dilemma a few years from now?
Yeah, so the high school capacity right now, in the 2017-18 school year, according to Dr. Seversky's study, was 85%. So there is a little room there, but make no mistake, at 1,216, that we're closing in on 90+% of capacity. But we do believe we can accommodate the high estimate in the current footprint of the high school. With regard to the students and them moving through the cohorts, there's an assumption that our committee is certainly very cognizant of, and that assumption is that the children who are going to be moving into the district are not necessarily in the early grades or in one grade or the other. Theoretically, they'll be spaced out across 13 grade levels, maybe more heavy at the earlier grades and less heavy at the upper grades, but we don't anticipate one single grade level, and there's no way to anticipate future residents having a certain grade level or a certain age child moving into the district, but we're certainly expecting that those children be somewhat distributed across 13 grade levels, that it's not just one grade level being impacted. But certainly those children, once they're here, will go through the system, and at some point they'll all filter through.
But to piggyback on what Lisa's saying, if one of the problems is capacity, and you're at 85% in the high school now, and you're trying to build program and put in innovative spaces, you're going to be butchering those spaces to build classrooms again. So Lisa's correct, you have to look at the whole continuum.
Right.
So with the 6 options that were up there, the one that was the most logical was keeping everything the way it is and adding on to compound. Was there one or two that the committee said this is, with no regard to money now, and
Sure,
I'm not
sure.
really saying that, but was there one or two that they said was the best option without regards to money?
So there was no option that checked all of the boxes for us.
Okay.
So if we move 3rd grade to Crampon, now we're looking at a school of 8 to 10-year-olds with over 800 children there. So the kind of individualized support at that level that the children need and the kind of programs that we're trying to implement, this is beyond money. This comes from, is this best for children to be in an environment of 800, you're one of 800, ages 8 to 10. I can argue that that's okay at a middle school, at a high school level. It's harder for me to make an argument to support 800 children, 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade. So was there one that checked all the boxes? The one that came closest to checking all the boxes was maintaining, and I believe I'm speaking for the committee, but the committee can correct me if I misspeak, was keeping our existing configuration and looking at how we use space, possible additions or alterations to the existing buildings, but keeping the same grade level configuration. Didn't check all the boxes, but it checked more boxes than the others, I would say.
Well, thank you for such a well-informed presentation, the whole committee. That was pretty cool. And it's going to be evident which way we have to go when the steering committee gets to it, because we're going to know the enrollment for the next 2 or 3 years, because the emerge of building in Yorktown, the families that are going to move in, which is good for them because we're in the education business, and I think we do it best in Westchester. We have the best teachers, the administration. So, mazel tov, good for them. I'm glad they're coming in. However, enrollment means more class size, and we don't want to exceed 25 point whatever it is we have in our class size. So it's inevitable that we're either going to have to open French Hill, or we're going to have to build in Mohansick, Brookside, the high school, Crampon. We're going to have to do either or. So we're going to be sanctioned, or that's our job to do, to see if, what's the best way, and we'll get people to help us with that, to see how much French Hill is worth, or to open it, sell it, whatever we're going to do with it, to build additions and what sizes. It's still a little bit, but we'll struggle through it.
But I guess, I think we need to give the steering committee direction on what's the most feasible one or two. We can't go and try and research 5 different things to figure. That was what Mike's point was, and I think we really need to give the committee direction to say, here's the 2 things that we think are the most feasible. And I think that's where I'm kind of going back to the committee to say, what are the 1 or 2 that make the most sense to go and put it?
We
I thought it was clear, too.
I think the last 2 was
So,
clear.
Peter, we can start with 1 or 2, but by saying yes to 1 or 2, we're saying no to 4 or 5. And I don't think the committee is at the point yet where we can definitively say this option must be taken off the table. So I think the things that we're interested in looking at as an education committee and having steering look at this, it would be, what are the costs of opening French Hill? And that's soup to nuts in terms of opening French Hill. And what we have to understand is part of those dollars will be state aidable. However, most of those dollars will not be state aidable. So we just have to be mindful of that, because students are not occupying the building. So as we make upgrades, the state doesn't aid that. That was confirmed by our architects. So we have to be mindful of that, but I'd be interested in having our architects look at that. Well, what does it cost to install the security vestibules and to put in the door latches that we have and the different security features that we have, and also with regard to technology? French Hill was idled prior to wireless technologies being infused into our campuses. So there's a significant cost in cabling and running the wires in a wireless system, as oxymoronic as that sounds. And also, there are things that we would consider with regard to infrastructure and campus upgrades, the boilers, the roofs, all of the other aspects of the building, and reconfiguring the spaces to make sure that we can accommodate whatever grade levels are going to ultimately be housed there. So those are just some of the things. So with regard to steering, that's something that we would obviously want to look at as a cost for French Hill. We'd also want to look at, well, how much would a wing on Crampon be?
So then working backwards, if our timeline here is 3 years to where we're going to be pushing the limits of everything, in order to do something, we got to act like now.
And that's why we've started the conversation. You're absolutely right.
So to me, to have 4 or 5 different things to put the steering committee, to have to put costs and make, put things together, we're going to push this out till next year.
Pete, it's not actually that hard, because to me, I heard 3 things that you have to do. The cost to upgrade French Hill, you can take square footage numbers, and they know basically what it is. And then you add that to what the yearly cost to operate. Again, if you looked at what you had to build on to accommodate an extra grade level at Crampon, you can take a square footage cost. So those things are probably within a week or 2, right, Anthony? Because they're square footage costs. They're basically the same things.
We're going to eliminate 3 of these probably within the next 5 years, no, within the next month or so.
Probably
You know,
sooner
so
than
we're
that.
going to help this committee say, no, this isn't your best option, this isn't your best option, and I don't know if this is going to fly through, whether it's construction or through the opening up a French Hill. And then we're going to narrow things down a little bit.
Simultaneously.
Exactly.
And as we move through it, it'll become clearer.
Right, it'll come
as
clearer
where
to
we're gonna
everybody
be
with
ended
help
up. Yeah.
of if somebody's hanging
Yeah.
around with us.
Yes.
That knows what
Absolutely.
they're actually doing.
And we can schedule a meeting with the architects and our construction
Right.
manager almost at a moment's notice.
Right.
So the steering committee, we can
gonna get
schedule that
plenty
meeting
of
for
help.
next week.
Yeah.
And those are square footage costs. They do this more often than we felt that we would be overstepping our bounds if we began to look at the construction aspect.
And we can
of
ask the
this.
town if they see anything coming in the
We sure
future.
can.
What's
We sure can.
going on.
Of course.
You know, we have anything in the pipe or something, so.
So if construction looks like it
Is one of the options.
is one of the options, okay? So ideally then, is this going to be funded internally, or is it going to have to go for a bond?
We have to talk about
We have
that.
to get the costs down. Without the costs, I'd be speculating. And so
we
in the
don't
interest
know
of
that
not
yet.
speculating, let's get the
Okay.
costs first, and then I'm guessing
I'm just trying to
steering
get,
would bring
because
that back.
if it becomes a bondable deal, then is it going to have to go on this year's? I mean, because.
No, I know, but that's one of the things we'd have to have, like our construction manager and our architects know
Absolutely.
those timelines, and they know how all that works, so that would be something good to ask. But one of the things I would ask
So Jackie,
before we
then
even,
from a timeline standpoint,
We have
we
to know
have to
that
have
next week.
decisions here in the next couple months.
Yeah.
In order to do it, right? I'm
You
just
got it.
trying to work with timelines.
So kind
Yeah,
of like
I know.
after the budget.
because,
After the budget.
no, it's got to be during the
No,
budget,
it's gotta be
Anthony,
during the budget, Anthony.
Yeah, why?
because we got to start now. If you're even thinking anything 3
Well,
years out.
all right,
we're
let's
starting
talk
now.
about
It
that. Let's
depends
talk-
on the option
Right.
that we're going to choose.
Right, exactly.
So depending on
I'm
the
sorry,
option that
right.
kind of bubbles to the top of our thought process, that'll help us to determine a timeline. So let's see where this
Yeah.
goes in
I
steering.
just have a question, because I don't have Seversky's study with me, and I don't remember. Did he give a range, a percentage of building usage that was considered comfortable, like gave room for growth, and what did he say was the comfortable number?
Yeah,
Said
he
that
did.
in the presentation,
Yes,
but
he
he
did.
did not
Actually,
include
this
it.
was a question I'd asked him, and his answer was, you don't want to exceed that 85,
Yes.
90.
But
at
85 is like pushing it, so what is the
Yes.
comfortable number that you wouldn't push 85 at, you know what I mean? Like 80, you don't want to build to 85.
And we can certainly follow up with Dr.
Yeah.
Seversky for what that comfortable.
that did-
I think what he told me is what he would tell you, is it depends on what kind of program you're looking to run.
he did say
And
that
it looks
too.
like, and it depends on what kind of instructional opportunities you'd like to present to children.
Yeah.
So if we're looking for math, English, science, social studies, then, you can operate at 85%. But if you're looking at having an e-STEAM lab, a mindfulness place, or some of the other resources that are available to students, then 85% might be a little too tight for those.
Dr. Hatter, can I ask you a question, or committee, the question? So when you considered everything in this report here, do you equate enrollment to class size? I mean, do you consider if enrollment
No.
is going to be larger, do you figure class size? So how does that work?
You add more sections, which means you need more classrooms to house
And
those
then
sections.
through sections, it's going to increase
The footprint of the
the
building.
footprint of the building. That's what I wanted to get to. Thank you. Case closed.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
So
One of the things that I heard in the beginning of the presentation was that we were also going to look at neighboring districts as far as what they do. But I didn't hear anything about what we learned from that. Was any of that researched and anything close to what we do or helpful?
So I did a lot of that, and I know, Lisa, we spoke to our counterparts in other districts, and I know the principals just do that in general. You speak to your counterparts to find out what works, what doesn't work. So I can tell you that in some neighboring districts, I won't name them, they had a 5-12 middle school, high school campus, and they have run away from that because the issues that they were experiencing on the buses were tremendous. I had a 6-12 campus in my former district, and we had issues with 6th graders and 11th grade. 12th graders didn't really ride the bus in my former district, but 11th graders would, and that age gap created some problems. It's just different conversations when you're 12 to when you're 17. And that was something that the community was very mindful of. So we had conversations in those regards. Nothing that we published in our report. We can happily include different models and conversations that took place in a subsequent report or in this report. We can amend it or append it. But if there's anything specific, we'd be happy.
Well, I think for me, I grew up in a neighboring district, and what I see as a big difference, they use the neighborhood school K through 5 program. However, our schools are all next to each other. I mean, we have a very large footprint of a district, but we don't, the geographic location of our schools is all together. Where I went to school, they were very spread out, and everybody came together eventually in middle school, and then high school separated out again. But it just seems to me we're kind of handicapped with the way our buildings are located, in that we really can't, you'd be busing people from all over the place to try to come to one location if we did the K through 5 or even the Princeton model.
Is the Princeton plan off the table?
Educationally.
Educationally?
Educationally, there are pros and cons to it. The committee can speak to it. I think we have interesting views.
I think just the current configuration of our schools and the number of schools and the number of students that we have, even if we were to go to a Princeton model, we're still going to have an off-balance number of classes. We won't be able to get, one building is still going to have one grade level, and it wouldn't solve the problem.
No, but I'm not looking at capacity, because I think we originally said, let's look at what's educationally best. So is educationally best what we have, or is educationally best a different model?
So when we discussed this, we looked at our current configuration of K3, and what would that look like if we did a building that was K2 and 3-5. There are benefits to having all of your teachers for professional development and providing equitable experiences all in one school, but to go beyond that, it wouldn't work for our students.
For me, it falls
and
short.
And it's too much transition.
Okay.
We felt for that purpose, too much transition
All right,
wasn't
so
going to work.
that's off the table.
So
Yeah.
it fell short because of the transitions that a 5 and a 6-year-old, now they're 7 in a new school, now
New
they're
school.
9 in a new school. In pre-K, they were in a new school. They're in so many schools in such a
Okay.
short amount of time that connectedness, the relationships with the families that you're able to establish, the longitudinal relationships that are so helpful in schools at the earliest level is so important. I can argue for a Princeton plan as you go up the line, as you get to 5th, 6th, 7th. Of course, I can argue for that very strongly. But in kindergarten and first grade, it's pretty
Okay.
helpful to be able to plant roots somewhere.
I'm
I
trying
have
to
a
understand
question.
educationally what you,
Yeah, I have well, I don't know if it's a question. The steering committee is charged with finding the construction cost, not finding the best educational
No.
program.
That would be the
So is one in the same, though? See, that's what I'm having a little bit of a, so well, however, we could find a cost savings in opening up French Hill, let's say, or knocking it down or selling it, whatever I say, let's say. However, it might not be the best education plan. So is one in the same?
So I couldn't tell you that opening French Hill is a bad educational.
That was just an example.
But
That's
to your
all, you know.
point, though, I think what the committee has brought to you, the things that you're investigating are models that we believe are good educational models.
Right.
The 3 to 5 is probably the trickiest and probably the least on my top 3 because you have a school of so many children. but it's worth investigating nonetheless. Keeping our current configuration, it's been successful. Our children do well.
So
It's something
we're going
proud
to try
of.
and make a clearer picture.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's really the goal.
So Dr. Hatter, let's just play this forward a little bit. Let's assume we come back, we decide, you know what, opening French Hill is a viable option. What are we going to do with it?
So then I
How
think
does this fit into the game plan?
So then the education committee is going to have to discuss how that looks and take that on in more detail.
Then it goes back to you.
See, but I guess this is where I'm
Or we can
confused.
do it together.
Yeah.
Because what
Right.
you do with it matters as to what it costs to open it up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I'm going back to, again, I think we're shifting gears. If what we're supposed to be doing is what's educationally sound for kids, then either French Hill plays a role in what's educationally sound or it doesn't. But if you're saying, well, we come back and it costs, it's viable to open it, then we have to go back to the Educational Planning Committee. I think you should be telling us what is best for kids first, and then we have to figure out how to make that
And the
work.
committee is not at that point in their process to tell you this is the option that we want. The committee is not there.
Okay.
And in terms of our timelines,
Okay.
there are multiple ways. There is no option, as I said before, that will check every box here. There will be a con to everything that we present to you. Now, we all are different people, and we may have different lenses through which we're viewing this, and one of the options may check all the boxes for one of us. But as you get into a room with the educational committee, and we talk about the educational viability of each of the options, there is not one perfect model that exists. So in terms of the one that we would recommend, time is of the essence here. So we can continue to study this. We can continue to spend the next 6 months reviewing different educational models and the research that speaks to all of this. But we're not going to have the timing to do that. Let's look at opening French Hill. Let's look at the cost of constructing on each of the 3 campuses and what would a wing at Crampon be. I think those are the 3 models that we're asking you to look at.
Does
or steering to look
does
at.
reopening French Hill mean putting it back to the way it was pre-closing French Hill, so that the school configurations would be the same as back then?
Right, that
Or are
was
you
my
looking at
question,
some other configuration of the building?
Most likely, we would be looking at where it was.
Returning to 2 K2 buildings and 2 3-5 buildings.
Would there be a difference in the cost substantially if that would be, let's say, I don't know, 2nd and 3rd grade building instead? Would it matter? I mean, other than like furniture and maybe, cafeteria, bathrooms, height of desks and things like that, but anything substantial?
That, we'd have to have that priced out. We would have to have steering price out.
French
But
Hill
would
will
that
never
be
be
the
the
same?
same. It will never open up the same. It has to be configured, it has to be rewired, re-technology,
basically.
re-everything.
Yeah.
You're going to have to gut the whole
Right, it'll
that's why I
never
think
open up the same, so that.
that's why we're looking at
Structurally,
steering
the
to help with
building, the
pricing.
shell,
Right.
the
Right.
brick and mortar will be the same, but the inside will never be the same.
The-
So that whole thing will be configured.
And none of us can attach a cost to that, so
Right.
we're hoping that with steering's help
We'll
and with
attach a
our
little
architect's
cost
help,
to
we
it.
can attach a cost to that. In terms of what's
not that
best for
hard.
kids,
Right.
that's certainly with it. We would not have presented that to you as a viable option if we didn't think that was good for children.
Okay, so, Crampon with education.
I'm going to go back to that this is not a couple $100,000 proposition.
No.
This is millions of dollars. So ideally, if you look at the timing of this, we actually need something to go to vote during the budget. Because a year to go to bid, a year to.
SED approvals.
SED approval. I mean, in order to meet the timelines, so
Technically, you couldn't even do it because if you were something that was that much money and you had to go to a bond, you don't have enough time to even go through the bond process.
But I think what's wonderful is that if we, I don't want to say merge the committees, but if education planning is allowed to sit in on the steering,
You have to.
we have the education minds in the room, we have the construction minds in the room, we can put those together, because you're right, Peter, we're up against a time crunch here, and that's a reality, because it's a year to get these things approved at SED, and then all of the other work that goes into preparing for a bond. So it's nice that the 2 committees can be working, not just in parallel, but together on finding a solution.
So happy about that, a little coffee with donuts.
It'll be good, I'll bring the
You bringing
coffee.
them,
I'll bring the coffee.
All the time, I'll bring it.
Well, good. Well, we thank you for your
Wait,
attention.
did
I
anybody
think
have any other
I'm
questions?
sorry.
Comments, concerns?
Thank you.
Anything else to look at?
This was fun.
Good.
Thank you very much. I know you guys worked really hard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great work.
I guess we'll be seeing you. Okay. Part 2 of your presentation?
Oh, there's
Budget.
another one tonight.
Yeah, it's budget season. Yeah, you're not going anywhere, Anthony. We got budget.
Council President.
So this evening, we are featuring our first departmental budget presentation and for the 2019-2020 school year. If you recall, at our last Board of Education meeting, I gave the community just a very brief overview of the budget development process and the steps that we were taking as a district to ensure that we were positioned to meet the programmatic needs for the 2019-20 school year. We now begin a series of presentations on the respective departments across our district, and this evening we will be discussing the athletics and co-curricular budget for the 2019-2020 school year. This time I'd like to invite our athletic director, who's here in the audience, Rob Barrett, here to join us at the dais. And at this point, Mr. Cole, I will turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Hatter. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight's presentation of the athletics and co-curricular budgets is the second in our series of 7 budget informational sessions. This process will culminate on March 25th with the presentation of the superintendent's proposed budget to the Board of Education. There'll be 2 more sessions in addition to this series of 7, the budget adoption and budget hearing, a total of 9 sessions where the public has the opportunity to weigh in on the proposed budget before the budget vote, which is slated for May 21st. Tonight, we're going to begin with the athletics budget. The Director of Athletics is responsible for 71 employees under his umbrella of responsibility. The Director also has supervisory responsibilities regarding the physical education teachers throughout the school district, grades K through 12. The department includes the Director, an administrative assistant, a full-time athletic trainer, and 69 coaches that cover all 3 high school seasons. Here are the projections for participation in the 2019-20 school year. The number of teams and coaches is not expected to change from the current year. Again, we are projecting that all 69 teams will run and that all 69 coaches will be necessary. 2 new fall sports teams were added in the 2018-19 school year, freshman boys soccer and freshman girls volleyball. Those teams carry over into the 2019-2020 school year. Student participation numbers are a function of the gross enrollment numbers by season, adjusted for a very slight decline in enrollment overall in the high school. The number of students includes students participating in more than 1 sport throughout the year. All of the budget figures that follow are based on these assumptions. Here's a breakdown of each sport by season. It ties in directly to the preceding chart. Note that not every sport has 3 levels, freshman, junior varsity, and varsity. In fact, most sports are limited to just 2 levels of JV and varsity. And again, 2 fall freshman teams were added in 2018-19 and are reflected moving forward in 2019-20 school year. This is a summary snapshot of the current year fall sports season. The last column represents the cost of transportation, which, after coaching salaries, is the largest element of cost in the athletics budget. Some of the budgeted costs, including transportation, attempt to capture the estimated costs related to postseason competitions, as you might imagine, a difficult item to anticipate in any given year. Here's the same chart for the results of our winter sports season. 3 teams, the boys ice hockey team, boys swim team, and dive team, and the gymnastics team have been combined with teams from neighboring districts due to decreased participation. And last year is the spring season snapshot. The current year spring 2019 season numbers are projections. This chart is a summary of some of the Scholar Athlete Awards for individuals and teams and the Individual Athlete Recognition Awards. We're extremely proud that 508 of our student athletes and 24 of our teams have been recognized for scholar status and earned the New York State Public High School Athletic Association Scholar Athlete School of Excellence Award. 64 members of our class of 2018 athletes received the Superintendent's Award for maintaining a minimum GPA of 3.5. Here is a summary of the proposed budget for athletics. Coaching salaries reflect the impact of a recently settled unit contract, the addition of the 2 new fall sports teams, and anticipated postseason cost impacts. We expect the total budget to rise by approximately $44,000. Next, we'll talk a bit about co-curricular activities in both the high school and middle school. Here's a summary of the various clubs offered to students in the high school. In total, more than 1,100 students participate in these clubs. Students can and often do participate in more than one club, so the 1,100 students does not represent unique students, just the total aggregate participation. Clubs that are new offerings are indicated with an asterisk on this chart. When new clubs are proposed in the high school, they are run without compensation to the teacher advisor. Some additional items of note: the Midnight Run Club appears for the first time on this list. Students have participated in this effort for many years prior outside of the formal club status. The Robotics Club advisors are paid a stipend for their efforts. That cost does not appear in the co-curricular section of the budget. The Food Club has no associated cost for the advisor, and class advisors and coordinators represent the entire population of each grade level. They coordinate the various activities of the grade level as a whole. As such, no participation numbers are listed here. Here is that same chart for the middle school. Total participation in grades 6 through 8 is estimated to be roughly 700 students. New clubs, again, are labeled here. However, new clubs are not piloted here as in the high school. The supervisory dollars paid to teachers are reassigned each year to the clubs that are active. Each budget season, we provide a list of new clubs running in the high school as of the current school year. As mentioned previously, new clubs are run on a pilot basis with no stipends attached to them in the first year. If participation warrants, they may be run as a permanent clubs in subsequent years, but without increasing the overall amount of money spent on the clubs in the aggregate. This chart reflects clubs that were active in the previous school year but will not be running in the 2019-2020 school year. And here are the line item costs for the co-curricular budget. In total, we project a $2,525 increase. That translates to a 1% increase. Some items still under consideration include Destination Imagination costs in the co-curricular section. The global competition for Destination Imagination costs have increased, and the number of teams expected to participate in the 2019-20 school year is still under review. We do currently spend approximately $25,000 in support of the program, but these items listed here are on our radar. In athletics, we're still considering additional coaching supervision for the cross-country and winter-spring track teams. The sheer number of participants is driving this review. The next budget presentation in our series is slated for February 4th. On that night, we'll detail the elements of debt service and transportation. We'll be more than happy to take your questions. Representatives from the athletics department, the middle school and high school are on hand to provide context and detailed answers to any questions you might have. Thank you.
Want to take it one at a time, or you want to bring everybody up? I want to just do athletics first. We have Rob here. First of all, thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
You're on the budget trail. Rob, can I start with one quick question? Last year, we put money towards the Huddle software. Can you explain how that's working and what's going on with it?
Sure. I can tell you it's a fantastic addition to the athletic department. The feedback from the coaches has been wonderful. What I would say is it's like moving from blackboards to what you have in front of you for athletes. The blackboards work, the dry erase boards work, pen and paper work, but the computers add another whole dimension to it. All our coaches our varsity coaches are currently using it. JV coaches are starting to implement it a little bit as they learn what it's about from the varsity coaches. Some of I shouldn't say all of our varsity coaches, the individual sports make it a little difficult in terms of if you have a basketball game, you can break down a film that way. From a swimming standpoint, you're looking at just the individual, and then you're trying to break down stroke, but you're not necessarily game planning like you would with basketball, soccer, and football, and so on. It's been great. The feedback from our female coaches have been awesome, which was really the premise this year. Our boys teams were using it last year, football in particular. Excuse me, I'm battling a little bit of a sore throat. Our football team was using it. Now we have our coaches using it, but they were independently funding it, and it became a haves and have-nots. And I'm really proud to say that now all of our athletes are using it, and it's just been a wonderful addition.
Any questions, Lisa?
Yeah, so I wanted to ask about the freshman teams that got added. how that worked out, and the sports that don't have the freshman level, do you see a need to add a freshman level to those sports?
So the ones that we added were filled to capacity. We had 18 kids on our boys soccer team, and we had 14 on our girls volleyball team.
When you say filled to capacity, were there kids turned away?
No, not at all. No, which was great. We didn't end up making one cut at either level. We were able to kind of move the pieces around and keep all the kids involved. What did happen is that as I was looking to get schedules for freshmen, they ended up being JVB teams. And at first I was a little concerned about that, but it ends up being even better than I had hoped, in the sense that we were trying to find ways to keep freshmen connected to the high school. Now I can keep freshmen and sophomores connected to the high school for another year by doing the JVB model. We would end up traveling more than I wanted to travel. So by going to the JVB model, we were able to stay closer to the schools that were nearby, still keep the kids that we anticipated being involved, and now we get to do that for yet another year. So, and there still is a little bit of a movement. We could add another kid or two to each of those teams and still feel comfortable with uniforms, equipment, and that kind of thing.
So what's the difference between a JVB team and a freshman team?
Essentially, you're just playing a JV schedule. So, for example, Lakeland they have a JVA and a JVB. We could play their JVA, we could play their JVB. So it just enables you to have a little more flexibility with getting games. The competition's a little bit better, and it really kind of just allows you to stay closer to home, as opposed to traveling maybe up to like Kipsey or Newburgh and some of those Middletown, where they have some of those natural freshman teams.
So when I look at the list of other sports, do you see a need in some other sports to either add a JVB or a freshman team?
No, not yet. Our cuts haven't been tremendous. Well, the cuts that we have that are tremendous, meaning more than other sports, are teams that we do already have freshman teams. So there's just no place else to go at that point. We have others that we aren't operating. We didn't operate this past year, so some of them are there. But it depends on the year when they come in. So as of right now, no, I feel pretty comfortable where we are. But as we start to see what changes in the landscape and what programs are becoming stronger in the YAC, then that could change my thought process.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, I have a question about our merged teams. I think we have 3 teams that are merged with other school districts. How does that work, and how's it working out? And also, how do we assess that year to year? Is it reassessed every year moving into the season or moving into the school year? How does that all work?
Yes, by section rule, you have to apply for a merger each year, so it kind of forces you, in a sense, to look at what your numbers are going to be. I don't anticipate any mergers outside of the ones that we have right now, but the mergers have been working well. Essentially what it is that we don't have enough kids to field our own team in any one of those 3 sports. We find a school that's similar, hopefully in proximity to, that has the same kind of thing going on, where they don't have enough kids to field a team on their own. So what we do is kind of sit, chat, and see how we're going to make that work. And I've been lucky. We have good relationships with the schools that we've been in. They've been successful. For example, our boys swim team just won the Conference 3 championship, which is great. I've been to many of their swim meets. The kids all seem to be getting along, which is awesome. Just recently, last night, hockey played, in our hockey program has been great. Last year, they were 1 goal away in the last minutes from going to the section final in hockey. So from a competitive standpoint, it's been great, but also from a camaraderie standpoint, the kids have been getting along great. I haven't had one complaint where we've had kids not getting along in the 2 years that we've been doing it so far.
Good.
That I've had
Right.
been with it for 2 years.
Okay, thanks.
Rashmi?
I have a question on the after-school clubs that did not run for this year. Is the plan to?
Oh, wait, that's not for Rob, though.
Yeah, that's for Tom.
Oh, Tom, okay.
Can I?
Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Can I?
Go ahead,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. So is the plan to idle them also for the 2019-2020 year?
Yeah.
Like, is the plan to idle, and are they idled based on enrollment, or how do we sort of come
So
up?
the high school clubs, we do review them a few times a year. There's 2 checkpoints, mid-year, end of year. We don't go by enrollment unless it depends on the club where we would consider enrollment. I always use yearbook as an example. We may only have 4 photographers in the entire high school, but yet they produce a lifetime memory. So that's not something that we would put a cap on the numbers there. If we have enough students, we think it's viable to run, we run it. And that's the beauty of my role. I get to meet with the kids, I get to meet with the advisor, and assess it at the end of each year and make some decisions about the upcoming year.
Okay. So this slide 15 is just clubs that did not run this year. It doesn't mean that they won't run the coming year.
Yeah, and to give you 2 great examples that are piloted, the Young Democrats and the Young Republicans we ran years ago didn't have the interest, and now we're bringing them back.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Both sides.
Go ahead, Mike.
Excuse me. I guess one of the things I was looking at, Rob, is outside of increasing in coaches' salaries, the only really other large increase in the budget is for BOCES related services. Can you kind of speak to what that's for and if we have any control over that at all?
Sure. Essentially, the increase this year was they settled a contract with the officials. So as they settle contract with officials, those costs come to us in some shape or form. So essentially, that was the big piece in that. And then there's always their operating costs. I'm sure there's 1% in that for their operating costs that kind of get added to us as well.
So it's not necessarily a usage increase, it's just a cost increase on our existing
Right. Yep, exactly.
level. Okay. Want me to go again?
Pete? No. Lincoln?
On the co-curricular budget, where were the expenses for 18-19 tracking against the budget?
In the current year, we expect to spend 100% of the budget.
Okay.
In all the co-curricular units and all of the supporting costs. And I think we'll come within the budget for secondary performing arts, but that's something that shows some pressure each year, but we should be 100% expended.
Okay. And really just the only reason, when you look at what we spent in 17-18 versus what was budgeted in 18-19, there were some there were some considerable, there were some big increases.
Yes.
So I just.
Part of that is that in any one year, if a bill's not received by June 30th of that fiscal year, it carries over and gets paid in the subsequent fiscal year. So some of that depends on the timing of the payments as well. But we really haven't overrun any of the co-curricular elements in quite some time. A real diligent monitoring of those costs helps.
Anthony?
I'm good.
Anybody else? Are we good? And Mike, do you have another question?
Well, I guess part of the presentation said we're not quite finished with whether we need additional coaches or not for a couple of sports. I think it was track and field or something. So how are we making that determination? What's it going to cost if we have to go there? What's the impact?
So for me, it's always about the numbers that drive how many coaches you're going to have, just because you want to have as many eyes, and you want to have nice ratios between number of students and number of coaches. Track, is a great sport in terms of there's tons of kids coming out, and then they're also at big places, and that concerns me as an administrator from a safety standpoint, that they're in these big, vast, open spaces, and we want to make sure that we have people that can kind of monitor them while we also have coaching going on the sidelines of a particular track meet or event. So that's the kind of the piece there. We're looking at the numbers last year. Are they going down? Are they going up? I have the concern of the coaches come to me and say it would be nice too. We're managing, we're doing a good job. And as you know, Coach Smith is very efficient. So there's that piece, but I also want to be supportive of him in terms of making sure that he has the support that he needs in his sport, his staff, to make sure that they kind of can manage all of those kids. So it's kind of we're waiting to see those numbers. Our winter numbers actually were down a little bit this year, surprisingly, but we are projecting that the spring will be up. So, it depends on what's going on year to year in some sense.
Is that something that maybe doesn't require a coach per se, but maybe, a volunteer or a chaperone assistance that we could do, in a different manner than actually assigning a coach to the team? Is that looked at?
So we do have some cases where there are volunteers, willing to do it. The only thing with volunteers is, their commitment level, that's the thing. So if they have, a Super Bowl party coming up, hey, I might not be able to make it, so there is that piece, whereas if you have them on staff and they're paid professional, then they are acting as such. So, so you got to weigh that out as well.
Do we use any, I know if we have a football game or a big event on campus, we have assigned chaperones to watch over this, student body. Is that something we can do at track meets? I mean, can we assign some chaperones to help with the, facilitate the group? Rather, they're not really coaching per se, but they're there at least to make sure that everybody's, where they're supposed to be and not getting in trouble.
So we certainly do that at home because we're managing not just our group, but we're also managing maybe 3, 4, 5 other schools that are coming, and we want to make sure that they're moving in the right spaces and the right times and all that kind of stuff that you would with any event. Football, I know you mentioned football before. We also have event supervisors to make sure that everybody's moving in the right places for that as well. I guess I'd have to really look at the cost effectiveness of that. If we have 10 events and we're paying them, we're paying one, or depends on how many you need, 1 or 2 event supervisors, does it become cost effective? And then there's also the component of tracking down people that are willing to do that. Track in the winter is tough in particular because they drive down to the Armory in Manhattan. So you're giving up a Sunday afternoon, 4, 5, 6 hours, at a clip depending on what the event is. I don't know how many people would be lining up to do that. I'm not even sure how many assistant coaches that are paid would be lining up to do that, to be honest with you. So, but it's certainly something that we could look at for sure.
Do you know what other schools do in those same circumstances?
In terms of,
The
do they have
supervision
assistants?
and, yeah, what are they, what are they?
Some will do a little bit of what we've both talked about here. Some will send somebody if they have a willing person to do it. Some do have volunteers, and then some will pay an additional assistant coach. So it's, it usually is that guy who's retired that wants to volunteer, that's a track nut or, or whatever sport it is. He's just really into it. So you luck out with some of that, and sometimes you don't. So it really depends on that particular moment in time. And I'd prefer not to leave things to chance, so that way we have it locked down how we want it to be.
Gotcha. What do you want, Pete?
So does the $21,000 increase in the budget include these coaches?
No.
It does not.
That's why that's pending.
Should be an asterisk.
Exactly. Tom, on the Destination Imagination, they're imposed increases, so that means they're not increases coming from us, but coming from where?
Or I think, Mrs. O'Shea, yes, these imposed costs are coming from the governing body and the global competition. And I think Mrs. O'Shea can give you the details behind them.
So when Tom was mentioning earlier that we typically spend about $25,000, was that the correct number, on Destination Imagination? That has been to provide our stipends to our staff who are part of that program, as well as to pay for the regional and state competitions. The expectation previously was not to have a high registration fee for the global competition that our students were many times qualified to enter. This year, the governing board has entered a $5,500 registration fee for every Destination Imagination team that participates. So for us, we've been very lucky to have 3 teams. This email and this awareness of this change just came to us in just this past December 17th. So it's an impact for us for this year as well as moving forward.
What was the current registration?
So the current registration was the parents, when they paid for the room and board to come to the competition, were given all types of access to the events. Now, this registration fee will come from the sponsoring districts, and it'll allow the parents to access all of these events without cost to them. Parents would now be just responsible for the hotel.
So did their room and board costs go down?
Hearing they went up.
The email that came from the governing agency was, here's our new funding structure. Here's our new costs for this. I believe they've also changed location from where they are housing it. So it looks as if the governing agency is really looking to make some changes internally that, without notice to us or any district this year, now would potentially be over $15,000 for us this year and moving forward, if we were to be lucky enough to have 3 teams, which is typical, go to the globals.
Okay. Anybody else? No?
No, I'm good.
I know this is probably the elephant in the room, but we have freshman sports. What do we do with 8th graders? Is there some sort of a modified, how do 8th graders participate in?
We have this conversation
Every year, because every year we have 8th
voted for
graders.
freshman sports already.
No, I'm just asking how,
Why?
So Rob can speak to the
Go ahead,
roster
Pete.
spots on a freshman team that can be available in some instances.
So, in the past, if we had a freshman team that wasn't able to field a complete number for their team, we would open it up to 8th graders that, of course, had to pass the APP process, which is the athletic placement process, which is brought down by Section 1 in New York State. So we've had that happen in my time here. In the short time that I've been here, we've had 8th graders come up. The balance, we always wanted to make sure that we have more 9th graders than 8th graders. And we've run up against that a little bit in my time here. So we're always monitoring that. So because I'm going to tell you, it gets a little tricky sometimes because they're used to playing at the YAC where they practice 1 day a week, play a game 1 day a week. Now all of a sudden they go from 4 days, 5 days, 6 days a week, maybe some games and things like that. And the commitment level, we found some are right on it. Parents are all aboard, and then all of a sudden they go, whoa, we have to practice on Saturday. So I find myself being proactive in terms of meeting with parents and letting them know that this isn't, nothing against the YAC. It's just a different commitment level once you get to the high school. That's worked out 95% of the time. We have those few that say, no, I can't make it for this. I don't want to come for that. And then ultimately, just like any other team, if you miss something, there's a consequence for missing it. And parents have been understanding of that because it's been explained to them up front. In terms of 8th graders, we probably have a handful in each sport of where we have freshmen, but not a ton this year.
Okay.
So again, this spring is still yet to come, so we'll see what happens.
So are you advocating for modified sports?
I am just asking the question because I get asked a lot. I don't know
Well,
about
really,
you.
that we eliminated modified sports a number of years back
Yes.
because the YAC
Right.
supports those programs and.
And are they still supporting them
And we
at the
picked up
same level?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I am just asking the question because it gets asked of me, so.
Troublemaker.
You got it. It's my middle name. All right.
I mean, Pete's right. You should, if there is a concern in the community, we should be explaining why we don't have modified sports, because several years ago, I'll say it's at least 6, we discussed modified sports in relation to freshman teams. We had the understanding that we felt we could meet all of the community's needs by utilizing the local sports programs to include all of your 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students. And we actually went so far as to ask them to expand some of their offerings, like volleyball and whatnot, so that we weren't missing out on any of those sports. And it saved us, I think at the time, I want to say it was a $65,000 budget item, and today it would probably be in the 6 figures if we were to bring it back. So, it's important that people understand how we got to where we are. It's not that we've ignored it, it's that we had to make a decision along the way, and we felt that, the local clubs were going to be able to meet the needs. If that's not happening, then we need to have a conversation again about, what are the local clubs doing, and why are they not meeting that need?
And I would
As far
just
as I'm
add
concerned,
one
we've
thing
been
to
down
that,
that road.
is that extra year, and now in some cases 2 years, where you're connecting kids into the high school, I find is invaluable. We had that conversation last year about it, and now I feel even stronger, having seen it a year, that having those 9th graders involved another year, and maybe again with the JVBs, sometimes 10, 10th graders, I think it's just I think you're kind of setting them up for success, and so that's just my feeling again, I feel even stronger about it now that I have a year in.
And I'm fine with that, but I'm also happy to hear that there are eighth graders get opportunities to move up if they can meet the requirements, and I'm happy to hear that too. So it means that everybody.
Only if there's a space. I want to be crystal clear that only if there's a space, because I do, then I'll have every parent, calling me saying, hey, every eighth grader can try out.
Only if there's
only
space.
if there's space.
Okay.
And again, because I do think that ninth grader who's there should have that opportunity to do it. And I can tell you across the board, when ADs find out our policy, they're like, wow, I really like that policy because it keeps that ninth grader involved in the high school.
So, Rob, can you just clarify for me the two sections that we added, the boys soccer and the girls volleyball freshman teams? I'm trying to understand, are they only freshmen now, or did you make it JVB and they have 9th and 10th graders?
Yep, they both have 9th and 10th graders.
They
Our
do.
JVA,
Okay,
for
good.
lack of a better word, and JVB have 9th and 10th graders. So, again, if they don't happen to make varsity and they're still in 10th grade, they can still play on one of those teams. So that's where we end up getting them for possibly 2 years at that point.
Good.
And then who knows where their growth will kick in, and maybe they make the varsity then after playing 2 years of JV on B even. That could happen. In fact, that has happened in lacrosse because I've asked that question where they've played JVB, and then ultimately some have played varsity lacrosse. So.
Happened in basketball.
Yep.
Did you have something, Lisa?
No.
Okay. Anybody else? We good? All right, we're good. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Left everybody out late tonight. I'm off of the server. Okay. We go on to the rest of the, where are we? Hang on a sec. Okay, we're going to go up to personnel. I can open it up. Okay. We have, upon recommendation of the superintendent, a motion that the following be approved. We have certified personnel appointment and some corrections.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, we got committee reports. I forgot this. All right, audit. Reshmi.
All right, so a couple of updates on the audit committee. The external auditor has started working towards this year's audit, so that work has begun with Tom and his team. And for the internal audit, we have identified lunch money to be the next area for intensive review for this year. So we wrapped up.
Lunch money or lunch fund?
Lunch funds, yeah.
Lunch
Like,
funds,
yeah.
okay.
So lunch account.
Not the lunch money.
It's all money.
How much you give your child?
Yeah, it's all money, lunch accounts. And that's about it.
Okay. Thank you. Fiscal.
Fiscal actually met again last Tuesday, 22nd. Jackie, myself, Anthony met with the Tom and the team for a number of reasons. One was to review the tax cap calculation and make sure that we were on target with that because we had to have that up to the state. We also took a look at the proposed budget summary, including prior year and year-to-date where we were at. We looked at fund balances and where we were projected to be with those. We looked at some of the key budget elements and what those were going to look like moving forward, as well as some labor participation projection summaries. And we had some discussion regarding the presentation that we had this evening in terms of the educational committee and what that was going to look like and what direction to go in. So a lot going on. I'm sure we'll be meeting again as soon as steering comes up with some numbers on what we need to look at, and we'll have some further discussions and recommendations.
Mondays, policy, Cheryl.
The policy committee last met on January 10th. We're continuing to review our policies kind of starting, keeping in line with going consecutively from oldest to most recently adopted, as well as keeping in mind the ones that are up for yearly review. So that's sort of our process for triaging how we go through our policies. We reviewed and adopted 8 policies. We reviewed and deleted 3, and we're next meeting on February 14th.
Okay. All right. Steering. Steering hasn't met since we spoke at the last meeting. We're reviewing, actually, the bleacher design for the,
The bleachers.
yeah, for the athletic field outside, the outside bleachers. But I think we still have to discuss it because there were some concerns. So we're
Right.
going to be discussing it at the next meeting, which is
15th.
the 15th. Thank you, Anthony. But apparently, steering may be meeting sooner than that, because I think if steering is going to meet with the educational committee, we cannot do it at that 15th meeting. It's just, we need a separate meeting to start that discussion. Yeah, probably if you could, because after that is the break, right? So you want to do it before the break? Next week work? Does next week work? Anthony, next week work for you?
Excuse me?
Next week for a steering meeting?
Yeah.
If Ron
You're gonna
figures it
have
out?
to tell me though. Like not that day.
Do you need me to pick you up, too?
Please. I could get there myself.
Send an Uber.
He sent him an Uber, yeah. So anyway, we will just continue on. All right, let's go to board action items. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes for the December 17th and January 14th meetings?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Can I have a motion to approve the treasurer's report for December 2018?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Can I have a motion to accept the extra classroom activity fund report for December 2018?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Can I have a motion to approve the second reading and adoption of the following policies? 4110 school calendar, 4311 civility, citizenship, and character education, 4321 programs for students with disabilities under the IDEA and New York Education Law, Article 89, 4831 field trips and excursions, 4531, sorry, 4714 parent conferences, and 4740 honor rolls.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? I guess
Aye.
you can see what's, opposed? We're good? Guess you can see what policies we were working on, what section we're in. A hard one. Business office. Be it resolved, this is an addendum to KSQ's contract. Be it resolved upon recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Yorktown Board of Education hereby empowers the board president to increase the agreement with KSQ Architects PC for accelerated third-party SED review approval for the Capital Reserve Phase 1 projects in the amount of $14,000. The Board of Education hereby authorizes and empowers the school district to execute the said agreement with KSQ Architects for the same.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. This is just, SED has now 2 parallel review processes. So you can go the standard, get in the queue, and wait, which can take 36 to 48 and sometimes longer weeks, or you can pay for an outside review, which is called an expedited review.
Pay to play.
Yes, we're paying to play, and unfortunately, we can afford it, and some districts can't. But it's helped us to manage our projects and manage getting them out on the street quicker, which allows us for better bidding opportunities. Correct, Tom? All right. Island Photography Agreement, motion to approve the request for service agreement with Island Photography for the Yorktown High School.
Did we vote on that?
Yes, you did.
You said discussion, I thought.
I said all those in favor, and then I said it. All those in favor, did we vote on it?
No.
Bless you.
I don't think so.
No.
No.
You said second and
No,
then
we went to
discussion.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank
Just want
you.
to make sure we got it on camera.
You did anyway, you see. Island Photography, a motion to approve the request for service agreement with Island Photography for the Yorktown High School commencement on June 22nd, 2019 at SUNY Purchase. There is no cost to the district.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
A motion to approve the budget transfers listed below.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A notice of appeal resolved that the Board of Education hereby authorizes the law firm of Shaw, Pearlson, May, and Lambert to file a notice of appeal from the opinion and order and the judgment of the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York in Board of Education of the Yorktown Central School District versus CS and SS individually and on behalf of minor MS Civil Action Number 17, under the terms of the law firm's retainer agreement with the Yorktown Central School District.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Placements, a motion to arrange the placements listed below as of January 28, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A motion to approve the contract for the Briarcliff Union Free School District and the Yorktown Central School District for an out-of-district student placement in the amount of $92,422 for the 2018-19 school year for tuition and related services as mandated by the IEP. The tuition rate is set by the New York State Education Department.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Gifts, grants, and donations. A motion to accept with gratitude the following gifts, grants, and donations. $500 at the middle school, $500 from Regeneron as part of the matching employee grant program by Keith Anderson, approved on December 3rd, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're up to board comment. Anthony?
Yes. Just want to say thank you again for a great presentation. The committee did a great job, and to all the kids we saw tonight, all the certificates was wonderful, proud of them, unbelievable, but highlight of the night. Thank you.
Pete? Mike?
No, just, yeah, great. Always good to see the older kids and how accomplished they become at the end of their careers. So that was always a very fun evening. And the presentations this evening, you guys definitely put a lot of work into them, and I appreciate that. We still have more to do, but off to a good start. So thank you.
Freshman?
I think Mike and Anthony covered it. I'm good.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it was an impressive bunch of students here tonight. I think one of the things that struck me most is when Mrs. O'Shea got up and talked about our 2020 vision, sending out our students to initialize, impact, change in the world. And I think we saw the greatest representation of that tonight, and it just tied in perfectly. So kudos to these children, and good luck to all of them. And another thing I hear all the time is how well prepared our kids are for the college world, just around my own cohort of friends and parents and everything, and that was clear tonight.
Lisa?
Same.
Okay. And again, congratulations to Crampon, the New York State District of a School of Character. That's number 2 in the district, along with our being a district, so it's something to be very proud of. So congratulations to all of Crampon, and thank you to Lori and for the hard work, and Joe for their hard work in putting that together. Ron, Lisa, Tom, anything?
Just a quick thank you to the board for all of your work and listening to our proposal with the different models. I'm excited to merge the Educational Planning Committee with the Steering Committee and sit in on your meetings so that we can have this discussion, we can assign costs, timelines, just put it all together to make the right decision for our kids. So I appreciate the board's efforts in this. Thank you.
Terrific. Anybody else? No? Public comment? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?